So happy to have everyone here. Please come to Sukhasana or easy pose. Roll your shoulders down your spine. Rest your hands on your knees or your thighs. And take some long, slow, deep breaths in and out. Pull your belly button in towards your spine. Imagine that someone is pulling a string from the crown of your head all the way up towards the ceiling. Keep your chin parallel. And find your Ujjayi breath. So Ujjayi, you can even imagine that you're blowing on your hand, like your hand is a mirror and you want to fog it up. Right? The connection is to the restriction in your throat. You want to keep that restriction and then close your mouth. Keep the restriction for the inhale and the exhale. And this is the breath that we want to use for the pace of our movements. Once you feel established in your breath, on your next inhale, bring both of your arms up over your head, reach for the ceiling. On your exhale, bring your right hand to the mat beside you, lean over, reach to the side, and stay here, breathe. Long, slow, deep breaths in and out. Reach both of your knees towards the mat and then turn your head and your chest to look up. Feel the stretch on the side of your body from your hip all the way to the tips of your fingers. Option to stay where you are. Keep your Ujjayi breath. Or you could bend a little deeper and reach a little further. One more breath. And the inhale, come back through center, reach both of your arms up over your head, try to touch the ceiling. And exhale to the other side. Stay here, breathe. Same instructions. Reach both of your knees for the mat. Turn your head and your chest to look up. Feel the stretch on the side of your body. Again, option to stay here or bend a little deeper and reach a little further. One more breath. Inhale, come back through center, reach your arms up, try to touch the ceiling. And then exhale, bring your hands to heart center. Release your hands to the mat behind you. Plant your palms below your shoulders. Spread your fingers wide and point your fingers towards your body. Think about trying to get your shoulder blades to touch behind your back and lift your chest up towards the ceiling. Keep looking at me. One of the things that we do that actually starts to damage your vagus nerve or your nerve responsible for getting you out of fight or flight is hang the head, right? Lifting the chest, it feels so good. So then people hang the head, and that starts to cause some damage to the back of the neck. So you can look up, yet you'll want to keep an engagement in your neck and your throat. Breathe. Double check where your knees are. So if your knees are touching the ground, you have the option to engage your glutes and lift your hips up off the mat. But if your knees are up in the air, you'll more want to focus on bringing the knees down to the mat because lifting the hips up kind of defeats the purpose. So just check in where you are. Remember your breath, long, slow, deep breaths in and out. And lift your chest up a little higher. If you lifted your hips, squeeze your glutes a little more. And then on your exhale, slowly lower your hips back down to the mat and come back up to seated. Take a hold of your ankles and bring the soles of your feet to touch in front of you. Pull your heels towards your groins, unless of course your knees come up really high. Then think more about heels away and pushing the knees down towards the mat. Plant your palms on the mat in front of you and then inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, fold at your hips and start to walk your hands away from you. Right? In aesthetic yoga, there's an idea that I need to get my chest down to the ground. And when I do that, I round out my spine. So I want you to think not so much about what you look like, but more about the action of the postures. So keep the spine long and then start to walk the hands away from the body. It doesn't matter how far you come down. What matters is that you're getting the stretch or the action within the hips and the groins. And breathe. Long, slow, deep breaths in. Long, slow, deep breaths out. Option to walk the fingers away just a little more. Keep your spine long. Look to the top of your mat or the bottom of your mat. Reach your chest for the top of the mat. And then walk your hands back towards you. Sit up nice and tall. Now, you have the option to stay right where you are, or you can turn and face the long edge of your mat. Because we're going to open up the legs wide, when you face the long edge of the mat, it's just extra padding for the heels. So once you're here, and the legs are open wide, take a moment, take a few breaths. And then plant your palms behind your hips and thrust your pelvis forward just a little bit. And then bring your hands back inside the thighs. Sit up nice and tall, as opposed to mean and tall. I'm really working on my languaging. Some of the yoga terms we just throw out there. And imagine the tendons and the ligaments in your groin, feel them lengthening, stretching. A lot of like yin stretchy type classes are offered in the evening. They kind of lose a little bit of effectiveness for flexibility because yin is best practice in the morning while your tissues are not so warm. Stay connected to your breath, and you have the option to stay right here, or if it's accessible, Start to walk the hands away from you and come into a straddle forward fold. And again, the concept of forward folds is about keeping the spine long as opposed to rounding. So it's not so much about how far into the posture you can get as what you're feeling in the groins. If you feel a good stretch, that's the point of the posture. Give yourself permission to settle in and to breathe. And as we sit here, whatever comes up, be with that. Use your breath to release tension. A lot of the time with stretching, other things come up. It's because we hold a lot of like our deep rooted patterns, pains, and tensions in the fascial system. It's actually where we store our emotions when we don't process them in the moment. So a lot of type A, go, 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 go people don't love to slow down because it means I kind of got to deal with that thing that I don't want to deal with. So if anything's coming up for you, including like you're annoyed with me, you're like, I'm never coming back again, or you're just like annoyed with yourself, it literally is yoga supporting you in recognizing that you have certain emotions in your body, and it's totally normal. I used to rage in yin and then wonder what was wrong with me because I'm supposed to be chill and a yoga teacher. And then I heard a quote and it said, yoga and meditation don't make you angry. They allow you to recognize that there's anger in your body. And then I felt a little bit more normal, especially considering anger is one that I don't release very much. So allow whatever to bubble up or not. Maybe you're sitting here like, I'm fine. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's cool too. One more breath. And then walk the hands over to the left. One hand on either side of the knee. Reach your chest for your foot. We won't be here for long. Maybe there's the opportunity to reach for the foot and bend a little deeper into the stretch. And then come on back up and walk to the other side. One hand on either side of the right knee. Inhale, reach the chest for the foot, lengthen your spine, and exhale, if it feels accessible, come a little deeper. One more breath. And plant the palms on either side of the knee. Come back up to seated. Come back to center. Take a hold of underneath the knees. Take your time. Bend your knees. Bring the soles of the feet to the mat. Plant your palms on the ground behind you and windshield wiper the legs from side to side. Come back to center. Bring your ankles out behind you and come up onto all fours. Spread your fingers wide and place your wrists below your shoulders. And then bring your knees below your hips. untuck the toes and put the weight into the tops of the feet. And take a moment to feel this, like push into the tops of the feet and then feel how the low belly and the low back engage whenever you put weight into the tops of the feet. And then tuck the toes and notice how the belly sags. So tuck the toes one more time. Put the weight into the tops of the feet. Engage the low back, the low belly. And then keep this and inhale, bring your belly towards the mat, look up at the ceiling. Exhale, push the ground away from you, arch your back, point the top of your head at your mat, and start to flow. Inhale through cow, and exhale through cat. Your own pace to your own breath. Warming up and lubricating your spine for the day. And from here, I want you to add in any other movement that feels good to you or that your body's calling for. I know I used to come to yoga class, and whenever the teacher had us like move on our own, I totally disliked it. What am I paying you for? Well, what I recognized was that was me not connected to my body, not knowing what I wanted. So feel into your body. Notice if there's any like ideas like, oh, it would feel really good if we did some hip circles. And also notice if your body, you're not feeling anything. And just take note of that. Then finish up whatever you are doing and come to meet back in tabletop. And then walk your hands forwards towards the top of the mat. Tuck your toes and lift your hips. Come into a downward facing dog. Alternate the bend in your knees. Walk out your dog. Warm up the backs of your legs. Breathe. And then bend your knees, look to the top of the mat, and walk your feet up to meet your hands. Come into a forward fold. Now double check while you're here that your feet are hip distance apart. So you can do that by bringing both of your fists to the inside of your big toes. And release your hands down to the mat or a block, or take a hold of opposite elbows. Let your head hang and breathe into the backs of your legs. Again, since we're not practicing aesthetic yoga, it's less about what you look like. So maybe your hamstrings are tight. And so put a bend in the knees. Because again, if we forward fold and round out the spine, it actually takes the stretch from the hamstrings. And the purpose of this posture is to stretch your hamstrings. Tight hamstrings are a #1 cause of low back pain. So it's more important, I would say, functionally, to stretch your hamstrings and to look good. Breathe. Not that it looks bad to have bent knees also. The hamstrings are some pretty cool muscles. They attach at the base of the pelvis and run the length of the back of the legs all the way to underneath the knees. There's 3 of them, And one of the muscle's names is the semitendinosus. And what that implies is that that muscle is almost like a tendon. And tendons are a lot less elastic, a lot more plastic. So that's why your hamstrings can be really tight. The hamstrings and the psoas muscle, one of your hip flexors, core stabilizers, are very connected to the fight or flight reflex. So they're protective muscles that can be engaged and not released. So I want you to imagine right now that you are lengthening your hamstrings. You're letting go of any protection. You're safe right here, right now. Long, slow, deep breaths in and out. And whichever variation of the posture you chose, release your hands back down to the mat. If they're not there already, bend the knees and come back down onto all fours. Once again, spread the fingers wide, place the wrists below your shoulders, bring the knees below your hips, untuck the toes. And put the weight into the tops of the feet. And then put all of the weight into the right foot and bring the left leg up into the air behind you. Reach through the ball of the foot. And then just notice, like, I'm leaning over into my right hip. So try to find balance and square hips, like you're tripoding. And you have the option to stay here. You can bring your right arm out in front of you. An option to stay here, stationary, or you can start to flow with your breath. Inhale, reach the hand and the foot away from each other, and then exhale, bring the elbow and the knee to meet below your chest. Inhale, reach out, and exhale, contract. Stay contracted in your abdomen and in the low back. Keep pushing into the top of the right foot and flow with your breath. Long, slow, deep breaths in and out. Two more. And then come back to your tabletop and take a few rounds of cow-cat. Inhale, chest and belly towards the ground. Look up. Exhale, push the ground away from you. Arch your back, top of the head towards the mat. Come back to meet in center. Tuck your toes under and then lift your knees to hover just above the mat. Look to the top of the mat. Engage your core. Spread your fingers wide, push into your knuckles. That's right where your fingers meet your palms. Remember your ujjayi breath. Long, slow, deep breaths in and out. One more breath. And when you're ready, release your knees back down to the mat and we'll switch sides. So put the weight into the left knee and bring the right leg up into the air behind you. Push through the ball of the foot. And then recenter. Notice if you're leaning over towards the left. Option to stay here or bring your left arm out in front of you. Again, option to stay here. You can add some movement. Inhale, reach the hand and the foot away from each other. Exhale, bring the elbow and the knee to meet below your chest. Inhale, expand. Exhale, contract. Keep your abdomen engaged. And imagine that you're like really reaching out with the arm and the leg, like you're pushing weight. So everything's engaged. Two more. And let's meet back in table. A few more rounds of cow-cat. And come back to neutral one more time. Keep your lower body just as it is, hips over knees, and then start to walk the hands away from you, bringing your chest down towards the ground. So we're doing we're doing puppy pose or anahatasana in yin. We're not doing child's pose. So if you find that it's pretty hard to get the chest down onto the ground, it can help to have like a pillow or a block under your chest. And if the chest comes all the way down, then rest your chin on the ground and breathe. A good shoulder stretch here. Stay with your ujjayi. Breathe. Notice what comes up for you. We won't be here much longer. Long, slow, deep breaths in. Long, slow, deep breaths out. And put the weight into the elbows. And then start to shift your weight forward. Come down onto your belly. Untuck your toes. Bring your elbows below your shoulders and plant your palms flat on the mat in front of you. And look forward. You have an option to stay here like this with your head in neutral, or you can hang your head and stretch out the back of the neck. Long, slow, deep breaths in. and long. So deep breaths out. I'm obsessed with back pain. I feel like one of the biggest complaints I hear or see in the world, even as a nurse, was back pain. And the incidence of back pain is even more common than a cold. So that means almost every single person in the world will experience some form of back pain at some point in their lives. And so in every class, I like to touch on the 7 directions of the spine. And then also the 3 main practices to prevent and or treat back pain. So the first one we did, stretch the hamstrings. The second one we just did, work on the core, not just the abs, the core. And then the fourth is to engage the glutes in some way. So we'll get there. Yin is a really awesome practice because it works out your plastic tissues like weightlifting works out your muscles or your elastic tissues. You know, if we injure ourselves, we don't injure the muscle usually, right? We injure the attachment point, the tendon. If you injure the muscle, it's okay, it's great. In like 6 weeks, everything's fine. But when and you'll know this if you've done this, when you injure the ligament or the tendon, you could be injured for a year. You could be injured for the rest of your life. So first and foremost, prevention is the most helpful. Strengthening the plastic tissues, the fascia, the tendons, the ligaments. And the way that we do that is through compression and tension, or compressive stress and tensile stress. And right now in your low back, that's what we're doing. We're compressing the tissues, but also coming to a place of not moving, of stillness, so that the muscles aren't stealing the stretch. And while stretch is very helpful for aligning fibers to prevent injury or realigning fibers to decrease injury with the muscles, the stretch is 10 times more important for the plastic tissues because it tells the plastic tissues that have very little blood flow, hey, we need more cells. Right? Repetitive exercise can almost like credit card the plastic tissues back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, not necessarily like severing them, but damaging them, leaving them open to doing some kind of form of movement, and then boom, that's where the injury occurs, even though it's like from repetitive stress. So feel your low back, feel the compression in your low back, and know that right now there's a healing response taking place. And all of the attachments of those massive sheets of muscles in your back are saying, hey, come make this stronger. A few more breaths. Bring your elbows out to the side. Plant your palms one on top of the other. Release your head down to the mat and take a breather. Stay connected to the feeling in the low back. It's like the release of the compression, allowing blood flow to rush into the space that we were just compressing, and allowing that healing response to take place. One more breath. And then bend the elbows and plant your palms below your shoulders. Bring yourself up onto all fours. Take your knees out as wide as your mat. Bring your big toes together. Push your hips over your heels. Walk your hands out in front of you. Extended child's pose. Rest your forehead or your third eye on your mat and breathe. And take a few more breaths here. And talk about downward facing dog. A lot of the time, downward facing dog is taken too short. The usual idea or reason for that, again, aesthetic yoga, is the idea that the heels need to touch the ground. Therefore, I walk my feet closer towards my hands, which allows the heels to touch. And now I'm doing a good job. So I want to eliminate that idea from your head and let you know that ideal placement or alignment for downward facing dog can be found in extended child's pose. So reach your hands out away from you, away from your body as much as you can, and then spread your fingers wide and plant your palms on your mat. Keep everything in place, come up onto all fours. Tuck your toes right where they are, and then lift your hips, downward facing dog. So your heels might not touch the ground, and that's okay. Put a slight bend in your knees and bring your belly towards your thighs. Spread your fingers wide, push into your knuckles, reach the crown of your head for your thumbs, and then roll your shoulders down your spine in the best way possible in this posture. Breathe. Pull the ribs towards one another, engage your abdomen and your core. Find your breath and your strength to support you in this posture for time. One more breath. And bend your knees, bring your knees down to the mat. Tuck your toes under and then sit back on your heels. And reach down, double check that all 10 of your toes are included. a pose most people love to hate. One of my students calls it toe hell. I always say to let pain be your guide, except in this pose. This pose, it's just uncomfortable. It's painful, right? But it's also incredibly beneficial to your entire body. Our feet do so much work for us, and I feel like they kind of get left out. In your feet are over 100 muscles, bones, ligaments, and joints. And really, our feet are created to be very like dexterous and able to um, take care of a myriad of environments on the ground. But we put our feet in shoes. And so all that amazing dexterity is like not used. And so the feet can cause a lot of problems. I run into people all the time that have fallen arches and don't even know it. And therefore they have knee pain, they have hip pain, they have low back pain, and it's really like an arch issue. So this practice can help with plantar fasciitis, fallen arches, both prevention of and treatment of. It really is mind over matter because you're doing absolutely no damage. It's really connecting to the fact that it's really uncomfortable and that's okay. Take a few more breaths. We're not going to be here much longer. And then when you are ready, come back onto all fours. Some people really like to tuck the toes and tap the tops of the feet on the mat. And keep the toes untucked and then walk the knees and the ankles towards one another and sit back on your toes untucked. The counter pose to toe tuck. Option to stay here, just like this, or you can bring your hands down to the mat behind you and lift your knees up off the mat. Find the posture that works for you and stay with your Ujjayi breath. Long, slow, deep breaths in. Long, slow, deep breaths out. And one more breath. And come back to neutral. You can cross your ankles behind you or even bring your ankles out to the side and out in front of you. Bring your legs long. And a common cue is to lift the flesh from your sits bone. When you think about how aggressive that is to your body and how that contributes to low back pain. So we can allow the body to do that for us so that it's not so aggressive. So you can walk your heels towards the bottom of the mat. Or you could even walk your hips up towards the top of the mat. Bring your legs out long. Pull the toes towards your nose. Plant your palms on either side of your knees and inhale, lengthen your spine. Oh my gosh, the sun is coming out. And then exhale, keep the spine long, start to walk the hands towards the feet. And take a hold of whatever is accessible here. Maybe it's the shins or the ankles, or even your peace fingers taking a hold of the big toes. Reach your chest for your toes or your feet. Breathe. Remember the long spine. Notice with your breath if you are able to bring your chest a little bit closer to your feet. Again, the purpose of this posture is really about stretching out the hamstrings, the backs of the legs, the calves even. So focus on the backs of the legs and keep the spine long. And when you're ready, plant your palms on either side of your knees. Come back up to seated. Bend the knees, pull the hips towards the heels, soles of the feet on the mat, and come down onto your back. Bring your arms alongside your body with your palms face down. Roll your shoulders down your spine. And remember the heels thing. You might remember, you might not have heard me say this, but reach down. Common cue is that you can touch your heels with your hands. And if you can look at your screen, you can see that when I lift up, my knees extend so far beyond my ankles that this is really damaging for the ligaments of the knees. It's a bad cue. So if you can touch your heels with your fingers, wiggle the heels away. This way, when you lift your hips up, the knees stay over the ankles, and this protects the knee joint. So whenever you feel ready, put the weight into your feet, engage your glutes, and lift your hips up into the air. Breathe. And this is the final of the 3 exercises I think are so important. Engage the glutes. Put the weight into the heels, squeeze the bum, lift up as high as you can. Breathe. Try to lift up a little bit higher. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. And then slowly start to lower. Allow the low back to round. Your tailbone touches last. And keep your feet right where they are and let the knees release over to the right. So you come into a supine twist. And this is the last of the 7 movements of the spine. So we have axial extension, which is keeping the spine long. We were doing that in all the forward folds and even at the start of class. And then we have lateral extension and flexion. So those are the side bends on either side. And then we have flexion and extension, so forward bends as well as back bend. And then rotation to the right and the left. So the twists. So you're welcome. Spines. Just take a moment to honor yourself for coming to class, for feeling whatever you felt in class. And if your head isn't in center already, bring it there and then engage your core and pull your knees up into center and then release them to the other side. So rotation to the other side. Keep both of your shoulder blades on the mat. Option to turn the head in the opposite direction of the knees. Bring your head into center if it's not there already. Engage your core. Bring your knees back into center. Hug your knees into your chest and then interlock the fingers around the shins. Bring your forehead up to try to touch your kneecaps. Option two, kiss your knees. Good morning. Good morning, body. I love you. Thank you. And then release your head back down to the mat. Take a hold of the outer edges of your feet. Bring the soles of the feet up to face the ceiling. Come into happy baby pose. So often it feels nice to roll from side to side. I'm going to encourage you to remain still so that the pose is not so much about the low back, but more about your hips. Imagine that your hands are like weights pulling your knees down towards the ground, creating compression and tension in your hip joints, both of them. Stay with your breath all the way to Shavasana. Long, slow, deep breaths in. Long, slow, deep breaths out. Anytime we hold a pose, whether it's an active pose or a passive pose, the longer we hold it, the harder it is to hold. One of the yoga forefathers says that the posture doesn't begin until you want to get out of it. We can look at this in two ways. It can be a very masculine, like push approach, but it can also be a feminine approach too, to allowing whatever is to be, but also not shying away from discomfort. Most of us are already aware that growth does not happen in our comfort zone. And this 100% translates to the body. When you're comfortable, there's no strengthening or building up of your plastic tissues. And same with the muscles and the elastic tissues. However you show up on your mat is how you show up off your mat. So if you can learn to find your breath in your discomfort, you can carry that into your daily practices. Few more breaths. Release your hands and bring the feet down to the mat. Walk your feet away from you until your legs are flat. Push the back of your head into your mat. Roll your shoulders down your spine. Allow your hands to fall away from your body with your palms face up. And take a long, slow, deep breath in all the way to the bottom of your lungs. Let it out with a sigh. And this time, let go of your breath. Allow your body to breathe itself. Take all of the thoughts that you have in your head right now and allow them to ooze out of the crown of your head onto your mat and away from you. Start to relax your body, beginning with the top of your head. Relax your forehead and feel your eyes grow wide. Feel your eyes sink into the back of your head. Relax your cheeks. Relax your jaw. Let the tongue fall from the roof of your mouth. Relax your throat and your neck. And let any tension ooze out of the tops of your shoulders onto your mat and away from you. Relax the muscles that run along your spine. Relax your arms and your wrists and your hands. Relax your chest and your abdomen and let your hips be wide. Relax your thighs and your knees and your shins and your calves and your ankles and your feet. And bring some awareness back into your breath. Start to wiggle your fingers and your toes. Turn your head from side to side. Pull your knees into your chest, hug them in. Roll from side to side. Eventually rolling all the way over onto one side. Use your bicep as a pillow. Take a breath. Use the strength of one of your hands to bring yourself all the way up to seated. And keep your eyes heavy. Once you're here, roll your shoulders down your spine. Rest your hands on your knees or your thighs. Take a long, slow, deep breath in. Let it out with a sigh. Do that 2 more times. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Return to your normal breath. You have the option to bring your hands together at the center of your chest and bow your head. Thank you so much for allowing me to guide you through your practice this morning. From my heart to yours. Namaste.